right, welcome to Your Time, Your Money, the show where your time is just as valuable as your money. And we want to bring quality education and insight to our clients, our prospects, our listeners alike. Today I'm excited. The doctor is in the house.
The doctor is here.
Yes, excellent. Today we have a great topic. We get asked a ton of questions, especially this time of year as we're getting towards prom season and graduation season. And
what's next, right?
And
where do I go? Right?
So today we're going to be covering, planning for college. And we wanted to bring in somebody that specializes in college planning, and that's all they do over at the College Advisors of New York. Dr. Dean's spoken actually for our group a couple times before, so we're excited to have him in. And ultimately, we want to bring value to that education. So, let me give you a little bio of Dr. Dean and, his background, which I think is extremely impressive. And then a question actually in the bio as I was going through it. I read, and I have to
Trying to throw the doctor a loop already, Mark?
Yeah.
Jeez, dude, come on.
He's president and founder of the College Advisor of New York. He spent almost 30 years in the field of higher education, including 17 years as a college admissions consultant. He's passionate, obviously, about student advocacy. And, one of the things that I think is impressive is that, just his experience in college and his, I guess you would say, tenure in college and his advancement is encouraging to any listener. So any student that's looking at college, he's really accelerated, got his BA in psychology at Allegheny College, and then MA in psychology at, I'll let you say it.
Duquesne.
Why are you struggling with that word today?
Well, no, I was joking.
Oh, okay, you're messing around.
University. And then went on for his doctorate in education. Educational Policies and Administration from University of Pittsburgh. This is where my question comes in. Are you a Steeler fan?
Huge season ticket holder.
Oh, there we go. So it's
yeah,
a perfect
here we go.
episode already.
You guys are all right. Ben retired. Yeah. Big Ben retired. You're going to get a quarterback. You're okay. You're in good shape.
And then earned a certificate from Harvard University Institution of College Admissions. Is a member of the National Association of College Admissions Counseling and Independent Educational Consultant Association. So, just this long resume.
How do you fit that all on a business card, Dean? I don't know if you could fit that all on a business card.
It's like the Bob Barker business card. It's like the old checks.
That's one you don't throw away. That's one you don't get rid of.
You walk into your car with it, right? So, without further ado, let's get this started.
Your time.
Your money.
Let's do it. Come on, I got you. All I can think is Happy Gilmore with the big checks, right? I want one of the big checks, right? That's a great movie.
So welcome. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Good to be here.
The most common question that we get is centered around when do I start? And I think a good starting point would be, can you explain maybe the process and what parents and kids need to know, on both ends and the time frame and that type of stuff?
Sure. So the best time to start college planning is when the student's in 10th or 11th grade, preferably late 10th, because the earlier they begin this process, the better. And what we do is we bring them in for consultation. We'll go through everything, including the student's grades, the family's tax return, and give them some basic advice, and then we can help them further. But one of the most important things that any parent should do, whether they work with a consultant or not, is to understand their affordability early in the process.
Yeah.
And that means a couple of things. That means, A, are you going to qualify for need-based financial aid? B, if you do, can you afford what they say you can afford, which is usually the answer is no. C, if you're not going to qualify, parents have to realize there are a lot of schools out there who don't give scholarships to anyone.
Right.
So do you want to pay $81,000? That's what these schools have gotten to now. Boston College, Boston University, NYU.
They're crazy in some cases, man, how expensive college is becoming. I see families taking second mortgages out on their home to help pay for school,
And big student loans. I mean, you've heard, Biden is talking about eliminating student loans, erasing student loan debt. It's up to almost $1.7 trillion, which is greater than all car loans and credit cards combined.
It's wild.
It's no wonder that kids go back to live with their parents.
Well, and you're talking about it already, but being the guy on our team that works primarily with teachers, which I love helping the teachers and educators and people in the school setting. Most of the time, the biggest hurdle is overcoming student loans. And I know there's programs out there for it, which we'll delve into a little, but I really want you to say that again, Dean, in the sense of when a parent's getting a kid ready to go to school, without the right preparation, what could be the What could be the real bottom line? What could be the real pain point, dollar-wise?
The worst case scenario, in a sense, is the student gets into their top choice school, Villanova. They don't give any scholarship money, and you don't get any financial aid. So you're on the hook. And this happened to 2 of my clients this year.
Wow.
For $325,000 minimally,
Ooh.
because the tuition is going up 3 to 5%, sometimes more than that every year. So if you have 3 children, are you really going to pay $1 million to educate them at a private school? Most people would say no to that. So that's why planning and understanding all of that process early is very important. And that's something that we do with clients. We make sure that they understand the financial aid process, how much scholarship the student's going to get, if they're not going to get scholarship, and then we can construct a good list of schools that meets all of the kids' needs socially, academically, and financially.
Well, I think that was a good point that, a lot of people wait till that senior year.
Yeah, like
It's not
last
on their
second,
mindset,
right?
They're like, oh well, they still got time. They still got time. But to your point, right, is that process needs to start earlier. And I would imagine that when they meet with you, the earlier the better, right, because of the amount of services that you provide and the amount that you delve into. That relationship with the client being the student and kind of the major they're looking at. Can you get a little bit to talk a little bit about that, identifying like the why it's important for a parent to identify the major, and then also to work with somebody like you that knows the different colleges that are best suited for that?
Yeah, so majors very important also. I was on the phone with the 2 parents today, and their student is thinking about medical school, and so if you're going to pay, med school now is out of control. It's $300,000-$400,000.
Yeah, minimum like $500,000, right? By the time you're done.
So would you go to an expensive private college with no money, no scholarship? Now again, for that one student, you're looking at $600,000-$700,000 to become a physician. So the major is very important. On the other side of that coin, you mentioned you work with a lot of educators. If a student is going to be a teacher and they're very sure about it, that's part of the problem. Most kids are not sure about what they want to do.
To your point, Mark, you're making the thing about the major. Like I've seen a lot of kids go to college, and then by the halfway through their first semester, I'm changing majors.
2/3.
Right? Yeah.
2/3 change their major after they get to college.
In the conversation I always have with people is to be a little bit more open, right, about where you're going. Because if you start small, like either at a community college or even a state school, you can start to build a rapport and an understanding for what you want to do. And then you can make a choice a little later on. So it's not nearly as bad on your wallet, for the kid going in. But I just wanted to get your opinion on that because I think it's an important thing for parents to realize.
It is. It's hard on kids. When you're 17, 18, you really aren't sure. The funny thing is the only ones, and I'm sure you guys have clients that fit this mold, the only ones that are sure and are correct as to what they want to be when they grow up are the engineers.
Right. I know I'm going to be an engineer, right? I want to build bridges or
we look at their grades,
design hospitals.
and we look at their
the
SAT.
military.
Right. Go to the military.
Everything kind of agrees. But the other kids, I want to be a psychologist. I want to be a lawyer. They go back and forth and
Get into politics, whatever it may be.
Right. So it's a difficult thing. But where I was going with that is if you are going to be a teacher, again, do you really want to pay? Boston College has a great education program, but
Right.
do you really want to pay $81,000 to study that when you could go to Oneonta, Cortland,
yeah.
Brockport,
Red Dragons.
and get a really good degree for literally less than a third of that?
Well, but that's where you see the crippling student loan debt, where teachers go and they get this great degree from a great college, and then all of a sudden they're making $60,000 out of college, and their student loan payment is $900 a month. Well, okay, there goes one of your checks, right? Like, see you later.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, when somebody comes in contracts with your company, right, what are some of the things that they should be asking or they should be bringing, or what are some of the things that you request or want to start looking at so that, as parents start assembling this massive mound, what I imagine, of documents that they need for college, that they should be ready for that?
So we look at the student's transcript, which is just, their report cards, the courses they had, and the grades that they earned in those courses. And that's because that's what colleges look at very closely. They're very concerned. That's the number one document in the whole college admissions thing. And they're looking for academic rigor, meaning the difficulty of the courses, and then, of course, good grades as well. So they bring that. If the family feels comfortable bringing their tax return to a stranger the first time, We recommend that because we can tell them, pretty early on whether they're going to qualify for need-based aid or not. We have them do a number of questionnaires and assessments before I even meet with them, so that gives me a sense of who the student is. And I've worked with so many kids over the years, upwards of 2,000, that I can kind of figure students out, relatively early, even in that first meeting, and understand a little more about who they are, and that gives us some insight on the kinds of schools that they should be looking at, and the money piece, and so on.
Just so I can add value here, because I think it's important. It's like going to a doctor, right? We always make this analogy, right? If my shoulder's hurt and I'm in pain, well, would I go to Jiffy Lube for them to check out my shoulder? Right? No, I would go to my bone and joint center, right? I would go to a person who knows. So my question for value here is, you start working with a kid, the kid that doesn't work with you, or the family that doesn't work with you, compared to the family that does, what would you say the savings might be for that family? Ballpark, just a generic percentage,
Totally depends on their particular situation.
School, right? Yeah.
On the school, whether they're going to get aid, whether they're not going to get aid. It ranges from a couple thousand a year in more scholarship money or financial aid to, I had a client who screams from the mountaintops, we didn't save him thousands of dollars, we saved him tens of thousands of dollars. He's an accountant too, so he understood that. So literally tens of thousands of dollars just in the planning. It's kind of like tax planning in many ways. And again, that doesn't apply for all families. But
right. Just want to give some value and some perspective to a person out there that their kid's like, I'm not sure if I go private or state.
Well, it's no different than our industry. People can do financial planning on their own.
Right. You can go to a broker dealer that does it by themselves.
They'll never see the difference that our advice and guidance would have made them over their lifetime.
Yep.
Same thing. People can do college planning on their own, but they don't see that value add until they start working with somebody like yourself.
The biggest thing I think the biggest value propositions are beyond the finances. They are for some people, but it's the idea that having an experienced professional leading your son or daughter through a process, separating mom and child so that they don't fight over this stuff. And what's interesting is I have my own high school junior. My son is a high school junior. He's literally going through this process, and I'm trying to have him work directly with my staff member so that I'm sort of extricated from it. But it's helping that student through a very complicated, confusing, stressful process and leading them in a way. So we help kids with their essays, with their applications, and their school list.
So it's not just the money stuff you're doing. You're doing everything, right?
And I would imagine
it's carte blanche, everything.
Yeah, I would imagine some of the students may have, not necessarily pressure, but feel that pressure of their parents behind them. So the fact that you can remove them from that situation and really delve into what they want, I think is encouraging as well.
Well, I mean, they might be getting pressure. Hey, we want you to go to that private school. Hey, we want you to go to the bigger, and it might not be the best case. It might be, hey, we want you to start at a state school or even a community college.
Yeah, the great grandfather's got the hat.
Right.
From school.
You got the Syracuse hat on, right? Dressing up like Otto, right?
They got the scarf and the school colors or whatever it might be.
I always like doing real worlds, and I'll give you an example. Like, if I'm a dad and my kid, let's say I have 3 kids, and my kid is about to go to college, and we applied for Fafsa, so we get $5,500, right, whatever that is, and he's going to get $10,000 from the school that he's going to, right? But there's an additional $15,000 that we can't account for. Well, where do we go? What do we do, right? And I mean, just without peeling back too many layers. Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, and again, it depends on the individual family, of course. Yeah. But most people have some savings for college. In a worst case scenario, you could steal from your retirement account, your own retirement account. Not a good idea. You'd pay a penalty unless you're 59 and a half. You can take out, so the student can take out private student loans beyond that $5,500.
Sure.
Most banks do student lending. The parents can get a Federal Plus loan. Again, not a great idea. Interest rates are pretty high. They can also borrow against their home equity.
Yep.
That is probably still, even in this environment, the best
way to do it. Yeah.
And then we also teach people how to kind of survive through their cash flow. There is extra money once your child goes away to school that you can use. Plus, a lot of schools have payment plans that are sort of a $200 setup fee, no interest, and they spread it over the 9 months that your student's enrolled. So there's ways to piece it together with all of those things, savings, maybe some loans, cash flow, payment plan.
Gotcha. Well, because I can imagine a student that goes to school. If my son goes to school, I can say, "Hey, Johnny, I can give you 10 grand. You're getting 5,500, but there's 15 missing, right?" So most kids will do what? They'll just go get a $15,000 credit card loan, right? Or take a private loan at 9 or 10%.
Right.
So I just like to ask that question because it's a real scenario where I think a lot of people right now are like, "Oh, I didn't know that the college had a payment plan. So now my kid doesn't have to have a huge loan sitting on his back."
Yeah, which also brings us to, maybe the question that we get asked a lot as well is what types of loans are there?
Sure.
What types of loans should we be looking for?
Which ones should we be avoiding? Like that's a big one.
I normally tell people to avoid the plus loans. The rates are changed by the federal government every year for both what they used to call the Stafford loan and the plus loan. They're changed. They'll probably be up over 8% next year for that. So you kind of want to avoid that. The private student loans also, our rates are going to be around 8%.
Yeah, 7 or 8% is what I've been seeing.
It's an unsecured loan. You're loaning a 19-year-old money who has no income, or maybe very little income.
I don't mean to poke fun at it, but I watched one of the richest men in the world make a tweet where you'll give a 19-year-old kid $100,000 to go to school, but you won't give him $10,000 to start a business.
Exactly.
Right, and that really rang true.
A brilliant point.
Listen, that rang true for me when I read it, and I was like, man, college has really been corporatized. Colleges have really been corporatized. And listen, I got lucky. I was a Syracuse guy. I worked my butt off. I got a full scholarship. I earned it. But man, if I hadn't earned that, I would have been local. I would have had to stay local. So I wouldn't have been able to ask my parents to pony up that kind of money.
Well, you ask yourself too, how far can the inflation of college costs continue to go?
There's no cap.
All the meanwhile that colleges have these massive endowment funds.
Oh, that huge.
Just the interest on those funds, just to be able to maybe use that to offset future college payments or stuff, but yet we're always asking the taxpayer.
Yeah.
For that, when some of these, college endowment funds are bigger than, multiple third world countries.
There's some bigger than some brokerage firms. You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy how much is out there. But, is there, I don't want to sidebar here, but let's say you're going to go to a school. Are there kind of rabbits you can pull out of the hat where students can apply for different merit scholarships or apply for parts of those funds, whether it be their ethnicity or their background or their gender, right, or their grades, right? Is there any stuff that you have as kind of hidden tricks that we miss?
So the biggest thing, and if people take one thing away from this broadcast, is the more appealing your child is to a particular college, the more likely that college will give them money, whether it's need-based, need-based or merit-based. So what that means is, and we're in a brand-aware society, right?
Sure.
So those brand name schools, the Notre Dames, the Harvards, Skidmore, Hamilton, Colgate, they don't give scholarships to anyone because they don't have to. They're going to get their class.
Everyone wants them to go there, right? Yeah.
But the unions of the world and the Hobart and William Smith high-quality schools and many, many others are going to give the right kid a lot of money. So there's sort of a myth that there's all this extra scholarship money floating out there, private money. There is some, but the biggest bang for your buck is understanding where your child's a good fit, finding those sort of hidden gem schools, and having them simply apply and get rewarded for doing so.
I'm guessing there's probably hidden gem scholarships out there too. I'm gonna do a shout out because a lot of guidance counselors, are part of that college application process, and they help kids find. Golub does a great scholarship every year. Stewart's does a great scholarship every year. They're there for the taking. You just got to go find them.
You got to go find them. The Rotary Club. So we don't, people don't need to pay us to help them find those. I can usually direct the family where to go. And there's a couple of websites. There's, Capcom has a great.
Oh, Capcom. They're phenomenal.
25. I think they have
$2,500. Yeah.
$2,500.
Yeah.
I think that's a key point that listeners can take away is that sometimes, it's not always swinging for the fences with these huge scholarships.
It's just
you can nickel and dime,
right? Yeah, if I put together
here.
10 scholarships.
Yeah, I remember when I graduated, there was one person that kept walking across the stage, and it was $200 scholarship, $400 scholarship, because she was the only one that was applying for these things.
Right.
It was like it might have been from the Girl Scouts, and just because she was a Girl Scout.
You write an essay and you make $500. That's the easiest essay I've ever written, right? Written. I shouldn't apply anytime soon.
In that process, a lot of times we get asked, is there a right or wrong way to be looking at like a 4-year education? Like, some parents say, well, always go to a community college first and then continue the 2 years out at a state school or 4-year school. Some say, well, there's a benefit to going all 4 years to the private school or whatever that might be. What are your thoughts on that? And obviously there's no right or wrong way with anything, but I mean, preferable way or ways that you see that a person can save some money?
For some students, the community college is a great path. If you're undecided in your major, if the family is struggling with income and struggling to afford a place, Hudson Valley, Schenectady Community College, ACC, they're all
Local.
They're all about
Instant admission, right?
Yeah, almost $6,000, and all you need is that high school diploma or a GED. That's about as cheap as it gets. So it depends on the student. It depends on the major, as we talked about before. There's certainly a lot of intangibles about a student going away to college, whether that's a SUNY school, public school, or a private school, and being on their own for the first time, having to navigate the world. There's a lot of independence in that, and it's a little scary for the kids, but it's also, I think, a really good thing. So depending on the student, most of my clients, in fact, you don't need to come to me if your child wants to go to Hudson Valley. You simply apply. They get their diploma. You apply.
We're talking if someone wants to go to Villanova or
even Binghamton.
Binghamton, right? Yeah, like a SUNY school, right? Like, because there might be little hidden gems that you miss that could save thousands of dollars annually. Exactly. I feel like that's a big piece. Don't be afraid. Yeah. It's never bad to hurt. It never hurts to ask.
Right.
And so I want to make sure people understand too. When you come out, it's not ridiculous amount you're asking for when you go see somebody.
Right.
So I think it's a very good thing that people know you're readily available and you would love to help. So
yeah, initial consultation is very affordable. It allows parents to gauge where they're at, determine whether or not, hey, do I want to continue on with this opportunity? And I would encourage listeners to do that, because you're working with somebody that has a specialist in an area that has done thousands and thousands of applications, right? And we talk about it all the time on the show. Whenever you do something for the first time, you're never perfect.
Going to do 100% right. Yeah.
So work with somebody that has that experience. And going back to what you had said earlier, your process is a lot like that of a financial advisor, in the sense that you're getting to know the student. You're getting to know the goals and objectives,
what they want,
and what the students and the parents want, just like we need to do when we make a recommendation. What are maybe some of the vehicles that parents can contribute to that you like to see that either are disclosed or aren't disclosed on financial forums when it comes to saving assets for college? We get asked that all the time.
Yeah.
529 plans are really good because they're in the parent's name, and in fact, they're owned by the parent.
Correct.
Yet they're earmarked for college. So the reason, because they're in the parent's name, they're counted at a lower value, lower rate.
It's 5% versus 20%.
Exactly.
Yep.
And some schools, 25%.
Correct. Yeah.
So in other words, if $100,000 were in the student's name in a UTMA account or a savings account of some kind,
the old passbooks that the grandparents would get.
Yeah. Double E-bonds.
Right there, their expected family contribution in the financial aid formula would go up by $20,000 to $25,000.
Sidebar, by the way, when you're talking about this, life insurance, if it's in the parent's name, not in the kid's name, did the cash value count toward
at most schools, it does not count.
Just putting it out there. I always try to, again, hand those nuggets over. Sorry, didn't
exactly. No, that's a great strategy. And now there have been changes with the Fafsa, or there will be next year. And a grandparent-owned 529 won't be counted at any point in the financial. So, if you're a grandparent who wants to help your grandchildren, that's a good way to save. And of course, if they live in New York State and they do a New York State 529, there's a tax benefit.
Oh, there's a phenomenal tax benefit. Yeah, up to $10,000, I believe. It might have gone up a little bit this year, but you can write it off if you put it in.
And we've got clients in over 20 states, so there's always a plan that we can customize around, depending on the state that a listener might be in, to make sure that they're getting.
And there is reciprocity too with 529s. I believe New York can use Virginia, and I think
you don't have to.
Doesn't necessarily have to be there, but just so you know.
Yeah, well, and that's just the evolution of the old Coverdale educational
Oh
savings
my God,
accounts.
Coverdales.
You know,
Oh wow.
That were
Those
you
are the
know,
old Series 6 tests, Mark.
well, that was when you could put away 2,000, and people thought, "Oh, that's a decent chunk towards college."
You're going to get halfway through the first semester
You know,
with that.
but as with inflation, they needed to open that up a little bit more, or the old educational savings account.
I did have a weird question because I want people to know a little bit of the story. What started you on this? Like, how did you start this? Because I know how I started my practice with Mark. How did you kind of get going down this road? Because I think it might be a critical part of people understanding why you want to help so much.
So I've always been in higher education. I worked at a couple universities, got my doctoral degree, wanted to stay, working at those universities. And then for some reason, I think I got tired being on a campus. So I wanted to do some travel and work more in a consultative way with colleges. So I took a job with ACT. They're one of the testing companies like the SAT.
Okay.
And my job was to travel to various schools, mainly in the Northeast, but even down south a little bit, and talk to them about our services and so on, train them on certain things. So I was always on airplanes. I was still single, always on airplanes, flying, and people would say, "Oh, where did you go?" "Oh, I just got back from Villanova." So what is it that you do? "Oh, this is what I do." "Well, my daughter's 11th grader. Do you think you could tell me about some good schools that?" So literally I fell into it. And started working out of my basement with my young son and running around upstairs. And I think about 3 or 4 years later, we got an office in Corporate Woods. We expanded to a bigger office about 6 or 7 years ago. And now we have, many clients that we've helped, and I have several staff members. So I kind of fell into it, but I've always loved there's something about college campuses and that educational environment that
Energy.
There's
There's a buzz when you
Nice.
feel it when you get there. It's such a great buzz.
It's funny to say you were flying around, because that brings us to our next segment, which is Community Spotlight
Community
time.
Spotlight!
Always an exciting time of our show. Today we want to highlight, actually no pun intended, but we want to highlight the Hangar at 743. So the Prescott Foundation and the Hangar at 743, located at 743 Albany Shaker Road, Building 202, Latham, New York, 12110. You can email them at info@hangar743.com or 518-633-1155. The Prescott Foundation and Hangar at 743 are a nonprofit educational institute that restores World War II airplanes. And
You had a great podcast
yeah,
there, man.
great
That was
podcast
awesome.
there. Go back and check that one out. But David Prescott does a nice job over there, just restoring history, and bringing value and education to kids on aviation. And if you're trying to find them, go past the State Troopers Aviation Building.
Yeah,
Don't go
barracks.
on the runway. That's not a good thing,
you can
because
fly
they're right
down.
next to the runway. Might not be a good thing. But once again, that's the Prescott Foundation and the Hangar at 743. Our community spotlight for today. So, let's delve into that loan process a little bit more.
Yeah.
Sometimes parents are overwhelmed by just the word paperwork and the expectation of like having to do it all on their own. Can you talk a little bit about when you take on a client? Like, what do you do start to finish to kind of alleviate that burden and help a parent out, help them through that process?
The biggest thing is, I really mean this, I want them to take out as few loans as possible. So that's where the planning comes on the front end. So if they're not going to qualify for need-based aid, if they can save a little more, whether it's in a 529 or some other vehicle, if they are going to qualify for aid, we can help them position their assets to lower their expected family contribution and thereby get more need-based aid. So that's my biggest goal, and or help position the students so that they can qualify for a lot more scholarship money. And so, oddly enough, one of the things they can do is test prep. We don't offer it, but we partner with people who do SAT, ACT prep, because the higher student scores, the more likely they are to get better scholarships. So
Gotcha.
There's a lot of things on the front end where we're helping them. And then, of course, helping the student understand you're going to be a really appealing applicant at this school, and that school. That means that, in part, you're going to get in, but they might give you a lot more money.
Yeah, you might have more leverage.
Exactly. So there's that piece. When we get into the financial aid process, we walk people through the Fafsa form, and there's another financial aid form called the CSS profile that a lot of schools require. And those things in themselves are totally onerous. I mean, they're going to simplify the Fafsa supposedly in about a year, but even just getting your user ID and password is ridiculous. So we help them through all of that. And then once they qualify, all you have to do is complete the Fafsa. You know, that rich guy you were talking about, Elon Musk, I think he has children. They could have qualified for the federal student loan, which is one of the reasons, one of the problems with the cost of higher education, because if everyone can get one, that gives the schools the license to drive up the price. But nonetheless, anyone can qualify for that federal student loan. So we talked to them about that. And then we point them in the direction of, you know, here's how you access it. You go to studentaid.gov, and the student actually signs a promissory note that says, I'm going to pay this back. I understand this is a loan. And then it gets applied to their bill at the college that they go to.
Do you see any changes coming through that colleges are, you know, looking at one test better, more than another? Or, you know, when I was in high school, not to date myself, the Regents was, and it was more of an advanced course. Now it's like the standard, right?
Now everything's about AP.
Everything's
courses.
AP. You know, is that something that you see coming down the pipeline for college planning?
Yes, lots more AP. I think it's going to be more important for kids to take AP courses. Now, again, it totally depends on the particular student. Not everybody should be taking all AP courses, but that's where things are going. You mentioned the SAT or ACT. Huge problem now is a lot of the majority of colleges in the country are test optional, which arose out of the pandemic, where kids literally couldn't go take the SAT because of COVID. So a lot of schools stayed that way. The vast majority, even Harvard and all of the selective schools are now test optional, which means you have the option of submitting your SAT or ACT if you think it's going to help you or not. And what the result of that is, the unintended consequence is, you know, NYU went from 80,000 applicants to 110,000 applicants in 1 year, because 2 years earlier, if you had a 1,200 SAT and you look at NYU's averages, you'd say, I'm not even going to apply there. Well, now you have an A average. Doesn't matter what your SAT is. So now their schools are flooded with applications. Colgate doubled their applications in 1 year. So as a result, those brand name schools have become a lot more competitive, a lot more difficult to get into, and there's a lot of strategy. Should I submit my SAT? Should I try the ACT? Not one or the other is really favored, but there is some strategy in there about whether you should take it or you shouldn't take it, and which one you should take, and so on.
Right.
Are there any things on the volunteer end or community service end that apply, that colleges look at, that maybe put a student above another when they're looking at that application process?
We like to tell kids, do what you do, be who you are. So if you like to do service, great, do it. If you're involved with your church, that's fantastic. If you're an athlete, that's great. Just show them that you're busy outside of school and that you're doing well in school, so that they're not left to assume that you're playing video games or you're on Snapchat all day. So it's kind of like we want them to be authentic and be who they are. The activity part of their application is sort of the last of 7 things that colleges are looking for. So it's important, but it's not critically important.
Right.
Any other hints or tools, tips, techniques, anything like that parents should be aware of as we close out?
One of the big things is visit colleges. Go make some visits. That really helps your student and you really understand what the school is all about and what's a good fit for you. It also adds to what they call demonstrated interest, which is a college is more likely to accept you if they think you're interested in them. So that's just one important tip. We want our families out seeing 10 to 12 schools in the junior year.
Yeah, I think that brings a good point, because this is kind of a little area of contention for me. I've been on campuses before as a recruiter, you know, representing a financial industry, trying to recruit from a college campus. And one thing I would always do is take a college tour with the parents. And I'd sit in the background, and it always amazed me on how superficial the questions were that they would ask on the college tour.
Yeah.
It wasn't about placement and technology. It was about, like, you know, when's the meal plan start?
Where's the nearest
Do they
snack
get
shop?
popcorn at the movie room? So, you
The
know,
little things.
If
The
there's
little
one
things
thing
that
that I
worry the
could,
most
you know, just emphasize to a listener, it's go to these college, you know, campus tours. Be prepared. Ask the hard questions that you need. You're trying to help your kid.
What's public safety look like? What's the outreach programs? What type of study halls, sessions are there?
Yeah, not what time the volleyball court opens, or things along that.
How much support is my kid going to get? You know, those are all really important parts. So
you'd think you wouldn't have to mention it, but when you get in that environment where you're surrounded with other parents and they're showing you all the nice glitz and glamour of the school,
what about that? Right?
You know, a lot of the questions that you were hoping to ask go out the window. So that's one thing thing I would I would encourage parents to do.
Looks like we're out of time though, Mark. So we burned
Yeah.
through it today. This flew by, man. It was really informational.
Dr. Dean, you want to tell our listeners where they can find you,
Yeah,
best way
this
to
is
find
great.
you?
Sure. Our website is collegeadvisorny.com, or they can Google my name. And we're in Corporate Woods Office Park, 18 Corporate Woods Boulevard, so we're kind of right in the center of the capital region. We also help people across the country. We have 2 clients in Seattle this year, a couple in Texas, and 5. We actually have a client in Boise, Idaho as well. So we can help people anywhere. Give us a call, 518-512-3021, or just go online and do the little contact form at collegeadvisorny.com.
And if you Google Dr. Dean Skarlis, it's Skarlis.
Spelling is
It's
brutal
it's
today.
brutal. And always you can find us at yourtimeyourmoney.net, 800-222-3202 in Albany, New York, 43 British American Boulevard. Thank you so much for coming today, and it's your time.
It's your money.